There's a kind of guy that almost no one talks about. From the outside, his life looks pretty normal. Maybe he's married with a wife and kids. Maybe he's divorced. Maybe he has a girlfriend, or maybe he's single. He's got a job, works out. Maybe he plays sports, or maybe he's just passionate about watching sports. Nothing about him on the outside says anything in particular. But on the inside, it's a different story. He's carrying something that he won't share with almost anyone. I know this guy because I've been him. And if any of that resonated with you, then stick with me because I'm about to tell you the whole thing. About growing up straight, coming out as gay in my 20s, and then landing somewhere in the middle in my 40s. And why I think there are millions of other guys out there in the same boat. I'm also going to talk about what I ended up building so the millions of us out there no longer have to carry this weight alone. And there's one key moment a few years ago that shifted my perspective and prompted me to reevaluate how I define myself. And FYI, this isn't a shot at any other groups out there. I'm just creating a space for those who don't have one where they can be their true selves. So a little bit about me. I'm Brendan, and I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania in the 80s and 90s, in a very middle-class area and home from a family of 6. Pretty normal upbringing. I went to public school, I played sports, I played music in bands, and I lived a very normal life on the outside. Normal meant straight. During my teens, I noticed that I was not only checking out girls, but guys too. But since it was the 80s and 90s, and this was southwestern Pennsylvania, there was a lot of homophobic language thrown around, so I just kept it to myself. But it confused the hell out of me, and it made me really anxious. I didn't know what I was, but all I knew was that I didn't want to disclose to anybody that I was checking out guys. From the outside, I looked and sounded just like the other straight guys, or who I assumed was straight anyway, and I seemed different than the gay characters that I saw on television or in the movies. So I wasn't really sure if I was gay. I didn't think I was. And being gay was simply not an option. I was terrified I'd be outcast from my family and friends and my community. And the most frustrating thing was I couldn't talk about it with anybody. During my teens, it was the 90s, and this is well before therapists were accessible. And I certainly wasn't going to talk about it with my high school guidance counselor. So I just kept it to myself and I didn't talk about it with anybody. When I was 18, I had my first encounter with a guy that I met in an AOL chat room. It wasn't that great and it was awkward, but it left me wanting more. But I remember feeling incredibly guilty and shameful afterwards too. Being raised Catholic definitely had something to do with that. This closeted behavior continued on through high school and into college in Virginia, and then after I graduated, also into my early 20s when I was living in central Pennsylvania with my first job. The weight of being closeted and carrying this, especially in new environments where I was trying to make friends and forge relationships with colleagues, was exhausting and constantly triggering anxiety. So at 24, I decided to finally make some changes and do something about it. In 2005, I moved to Boston. It was my first time ever living in a big city, which was great because it offered a level of anonymity and freedom to explore. But I also didn't know anyone, so my anxiety was riding shotgun. I had no contacts in Boston. Shortly after moving there, I met a guy online who would later become my first boyfriend, and he sort of coaxed me out of the closet. I remember him saying to me, "Brendan, you're gay. You hook up with guys and you hook up with me. That means you're gay. Just say it." And I thought he had a point, so I did. I came out to my whole family, my parents, my 2 brothers, my sister, and it was the hardest thing that I'd ever done. And then I ended up coming out to all of my contacts, my extended family and friends on Facebook. It was really tough at first, but once I did it, I felt a huge sense of relief. And I was like, great, I finally have a community where I belong. And Boston was very progressive compared to where I grew up. So being gay was a lot more accepted in Boston than it was where I grew up in Pennsylvania. I spent the next 15 years living a fully out gay life. I was fully immersed in the culture and it was great. I was exploring all of these new places and going to places like Provincetown on Cape Cod or going to Fort Lauderdale, both very gay-friendly places. I met a bunch of new friends. I went to my first drag show. I went to my first gay bar, and I was able to do it with a boyfriend, which made it a whole lot easier. And as my social network started to expand, I just felt a greater sense of confidence. I was doing great at work, and things just started to fall into place. I got picked up by a modeling agency, and I started doing some modeling for some pretty big clients. And then I entered this national gay bachelor's contest that I saw on Facebook, and I ended up winning Mr. Massachusetts and then co-winning the National Gay Bachelor Contest in 2009. And this opened up doors into being photographed for the National No Hate campaign and having a starring role in a feature-length documentary called Man to Man about gay dating, which is now on Amazon. And the good times continued. I ended up going to grad school for graphic design and then landing a really good graphic design job right out of school. I continued playing music on the street in Provincetown and doing open mics in and around Boston. And I dabbled with recording music at home in my little home recording studio. So throughout these 15 years, being immersed in the gay culture naturally had an impact on my lifestyle. I started listening to music that I hadn't listened to in the past, and I changed up my style to be like sort of what everybody else was wearing. Nicer clothes, more expensive designer clothes, and a really clean-cut, preppy look. And I started consuming the same type of content that everybody else was consuming, and I genuinely enjoyed it. So at the time, these big changes in my lifestyle all felt really real and exciting. In 2014, I ended up taking a work assignment in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which ended up lasting about 3 years. Fort Lauderdale is a very gay-friendly place, and I ended up having a great time while I lived there. I spent more time at gay bars and restaurants and beaches than I ever had before. Those environments had intimidated me in the past, but exploring them with the guy I was dating and our huge friend group made it a lot more fun. And during this time, at the age of 34, I also picked up surfing, which I've always wanted to do. And I also leveled up my music. I started writing more, and I built out a home recording studio, and I started jamming with other musicians. But I started to notice something. When I asked my partner to come watch me perform at a straight surfer bar, he wasn't interested. And likewise, when I wanted to go surfing, or if I went to a concert like Pearl Jam or Social Distortion or NoFX, none of my friends were interested. So I ended up doing these things alone. I was honestly kind of bummed about it. I felt like I had to choose between the things that I loved, like surfing and the music that I listened to, and my group of friends. This is when I started to feel a little different. I felt like I was living in the middle of the gay and the straight worlds. But I loved surfing and I loved my punk rock and hip hop and metal music, so I just kept doing both of them. I kept surfing and going to shows by myself and performing music by myself or with straight friends. And then if I was going to do something social like going to a party or going to a gay beach or gay bars or whatever, I would do that with my other friends. In 2017, after my 3-year work assignment in Fort Lauderdale ended, I ended up relocating back to the Boston area, where over the next few years, I learned that I wasn't straight enough to have solid rapport with one manager, and I wasn't gay enough to have rapport with another manager. Two things that preceded my career progression's glass ceiling, despite glowing performance reviews, several accomplishments, and awards. More middlemen symptoms. And then something happened that I genuinely didn't see coming. In 2020, the COVID pandemic hit, and I found myself unemployed for the first time in my professional career. With my 40th birthday on the horizon and plenty of time on my hands due to the lockdown and not being able to travel, I took the opportunity to examine who I was and reorient my life towards something that felt more me. I decided that I was going to stop letting my sexual preference have so much influence over other areas of my life. So I stopped compromising on my passions and I doubled down on them. I started taking online music production classes to learn more about music production software. I started surfing a ton and traveling up and down the coast to check out other surf spots. I picked up trail running and decided that I wanted to start running ultramarathons, even though I had never run more than 7 miles in my whole life. So I hired a coach and I started training 6 days a week. I got obsessed with self-improvement, physically and mentally. I sought out a trauma-focused therapist and started working on myself, doing things like EMDR and internal family systems and other trauma-focused therapy modalities. And since it was nearly impossible to find a job during the pandemic, since nobody was hiring at the time, I decided to just start my own freelance graphic design business. So during this time, I was doing a lot of trail running and a lot of surfing, and I was meeting new friends, but I wasn't disclosing to them that I liked guys because it just didn't matter. We were just sharing waves in the lineup together, or we were just sharing miles together, and it was just nice to be hanging out with friends who had common interests. And behind closed doors, I was still dating guys, and I wasn't hiding it, but I wasn't advertising it either. Not out of shame, but just because I was building a new life and I didn't want anything getting in the way of that. And then something happened that I genuinely didn't see coming. Just when I thought I had myself figured out, I connected with a straight couple that I met online. One thing led to another, and I rediscovered an attraction to women that I thought was long gone. This prompted a nudge to the left on my Kinsey scale and had me rethinking how I define myself and my sexual preference. Not long after, in 2023, I decided to move to Colorado since I could work from anywhere, and I wanted to change the scenery since I was getting burned out on city living. I was meeting new friends in the trail running community and the local live music scene, but I wasn't disclosing to them my sexual preference because it didn't matter. And honestly, I didn't have words for it anyway. It was too complicated for me to define it myself. So I guess you could say I was living a publicly straight life while still dating men in private, continuing on that recloseted trajectory. And since I rediscovered that attraction to women, I decided to explore some straight dating apps for the first time in years. So I made a profile and I uploaded some pictures and I listed myself as bisexual since that seemed like the closest thing to what I was. But I got little to no interest, so I continued dating men in private, which is fine because that's what I was used to anyway. And while I was on these gay dating apps discreetly, I noticed a lot of other profiles that listed themselves as bi or bi-curious or discreet or straight but just looking for a hookup. Guys who were seemingly living a straight life on the outside but not on the inside, similar to me. And during this time, I learned something important about social settings. When you don't categorize yourself for other people, straight, gay, bi, or whatever, they tend to do it for you, and sometimes they get it wrong. Now, this is just human nature. Our brains are wired to keep us safe, and uncertainty is unsafety. So people feel a lot better when they're able to categorize people. Some straight guys that I was hanging out with, I guess, assumed that I was straight and casually threw around homophobic language in front of me. And likewise, some gay friends misread me as a straight, toxic, conservative bro, so far from the actual truth. So I found myself once again straddling two different worlds, gay and straight. I basically accepted that I was living a double life once again, living a straight life on the outside while I was doing things like trail running and playing music with friends while connecting with guys in private. And not only did I find this frustrating because I just want to be myself, but it also impacted my mental health. As a result, I went looking for answers. I was looking on YouTube, I was searching for podcasts, I was looking for an online community, looking for books, anything that would give me some answers. But I found almost nothing that resonated with me anyway. And what little existed seemed to reduce it all to sex. But this is much more than just sex. Don't get me wrong, sex is great and important, but this is about much more than that. This is about lifestyle, hobbies and interests, pursuing purpose and meaning, mental health, relationships, and not letting sexual preference dictate unrelated aspects of our lives. I was surprised at the lack of content out there directed towards guys like me, especially given I had evidence and a sneaking suspicion that there were millions of other guys out there just like me in the same boat. So I saw it as an opportunity to create the content and community that I wished always existed, despite not knowing anything about content creation or podcast production or how to talk to a camera lens, for example. Middlemen is a podcasting community for guys who don't fit neatly into society's gay and straight boxes. A place where guys like us can finally be our true selves around like-minded people without having to pick a side or change aspects of who we are in order to fit in with the group. As you just heard, this comes from my true lived experience, not theory. And this podcasting community means so much to me that I'm pivoting my career away from graphic design and I'm using my life savings to build this whole thing entirely on my own. That's how much I believe in it. So I lived a straight life and then a gay life, and both of those felt real and true at the time. But then I landed somewhere in the middle, and that feels just right. I don't feel like I need to pick a side in order to live an honest and fulfilling life. And I also don't need to let my sexual preference dictate unrelated aspects of my life and my lifestyle. I just want to live the best, most authentic version of myself and live a fulfilling life. Maybe you can relate. If you saw yourself in any of this, you're definitely not the only one. I'm pretty sure there's millions of us out there. We just never had a room to find each other in. In addition to this podcast, I also created a bi-weekly newsletter with articles and resources and other content from the middle. The links for both are in the show notes. And if this resonated with you, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the next one. It's about who Middlemen is for and the challenges that we experience that no one sees but us. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one.